Starting this topic today, and the first thing actually I'd like to insist on is the answer of the question I asked you at the beginning. uh, what are the added value or the enhancements or the added points that the TSQL do provides to cover? What are the properties actually that they do present a security feature towards the work with the database or projects on top of a database? Mainly, there are so many questions we may ask. There are so many answers we may provide. Specifically, we may talk about the characteristics of how transaction is going to be built. T-SQL, transact SQL. We are building transactions. We are not adding new queries. We are building transactions via which we are passing queries to the database. So we saw the views, and we know the view, how it is and how it looks like, and the syntax of a view, and as per the definition of the view, and we present clearly that there are two security features: row-based security and column-based security on top of the use of a view. So we are surrounding a query, and we are securing a query from being inferred, or we are surrounding a query and controlling what can be actually viewed and seen. So that's the added value is the transactions themselves, the properties of the transactions, the intention of the or the background of why we need a transaction is the added value seen as a security feature for every and each single query submitted to a database. Simply like that. So we continue from where we stopped, and I'm going to pass Drew if you have any interrogation you may ask. So the work with the T-SQL is to make us see what the T-SQL is and how it looks like and what we can do with the T-SQL only. I'll start with the terminology that has to be very clear to you, and you have to be very familiar with that later on. Actually, at the end of this course, you have to be very fluent defining those terminologies plus others. For this unit number 2 is very powerful and very actually interesting topic unit, which is presenting a very long range of let's say terminologies that define TSQL, let's say technologies, yes, we may say that, uh, that we will use frequently, and they are a key secret for the success of the TSQL. Starting with the TSQL itself, the Transact SQL is the technology that we are using, and we just presented. It is the a group of transactions used to carry out queries to from the client to the SQL server, from the client to the back end, the background solution. TSQL. The CLR is one of the moreover that all what comes later. I'm gonna go through that briefly. They are terminologies defining predefined procedures, functions, methodologies that we can go for whenever needed to facilitate the work. Starting with the CLR, Common Language Runtime. It is a sort of a procedure, not only procedure. It is a sort of stored procedure. And it is not only stored procedure simply, it is stored procedure in the background. What does it mean in the background? It is stored in the database engine itself. It is stored within the SQL server itself. It is not stored in the API, the SSMS or the SSDT or the Visual Studio body. No, it is in the background itself, a common language runtime. And as per the title, runtime, it is to be executed called let's say here stimulated or called whatever during the runtime only. CLR. So stored procedure that has some of the tasks to do on the database engine, on the database, let's say elements, entities, whatever, from the database itself. So from the database to the database. It brings an outcome, absolutely. It has to bring an outcome. Each single actually behavior you do inside the database, not only actually he's not a key secret and restricted to the database use only, but each single project or e-project as a digital solution, whenever you're talking about an event to happen, there have to be actually an automated event happening. The context of the automated event happening and both the non-automated event, they are both of them. They need actually an event handler to cause the event to start. What does it mean? For example, to save your and during the registration period using the ID wave, after you select the course, you have to submit them to your advisor. To submit the selected courses, you have to click a button. The button you click it is the event handler of the event you did, which is the submission of your selected courses to your advisor. So the button is the event handler. What does it mean? Is the web component responsible for submitting your request. Event handler. Here, in the context of the T-SQL and the databases, the professional databases here, we may talk about triggers. The triggers, they are events to cause an event to be fired, to be executed, to be launched without the interference of the human being or the user. Does not need your click, does not need you to open or close or do something. It is automated completely. I take an example. Midnight, a full, let's say, transaction analysis has to happen. Transactions analysis has to happen for midnight. So it can be actually automated. Once midnight came, immediately the system will start the analysis. Will stop without any click, without any. The time had come, so the system starts the process. How the system will recognize the midnight that the midnight has come and he has to the system. It has to start the analysis. There have to be actually an automation process here named trigger. The trigger, it's a process, it's a sort of a code or process or function procedure. It cannot be a function, but even though it is sort of process, it's a command to be executed, but automating digital context. It works based on time. It causes the events to be fired without the user's interference. It's automated. Automatically the system will start, automatically the system will close, automatically the emails will be sent, automatically the courses will be submitted, and so on. Trigger. But the trigger is actually, it's a firer of events. We were talking about the CLR. We said that it is a stored procedure, but stored inside the SQL Server in background. Yes, we come back to the regular stored procedure. These stored procedures, they are sort of computer program, but they are in the front end APIs, SSDTs, SSMS, Visual Studio. They are all capable of generating stored procedures, and they are to fire or to cause the event, any event to be run on the database itself. It can pass a query, it can actually interrogate, pass a query to interrogate an entity, and so many tasks can do, even analysis, even math functions, and so on. It is a procedure to do, but first of all, it has to be stored in the front-end solution, then after executed by calling it again and again and again and again. Stored procedure. Remember, procedure, it's not a function. Procedure, you have to completely understand and absorb the meaning and the definition of what does it mean procedure. Yes, you have to recognize that. Also, from the terminologies we may face, and we are facing and we will face again and again and again, the database objects, the word database objects. At the first and the initial class, we saw a graph, actually in the lab, first of all, we saw a graph defining the 4 levels physical security of the database. The first level is the database engine, the database server. The second is the database management system. Third, the schemas. Fourth, the objects. Database objects. The database objects might be any component or any entity that has data inside. Table, maybe. Procedure, maybe. View, maybe. Any object that has the capability to store and present data values from inside the database, it is considered to be a database object. As a security concern, databases, they are actually to be run as part of a full project that uses the database as a background solution. So database, they will not be running all the time by themselves only. No, they would be actually running as a part of a project, a system. We take the example of the EduWave. We are using the EduWave to log in, to search courses, to find, I don't know, to submit courses, to check your timetable and things like that. This is a system running and using background database, the same scenario here. So, what is the concern of the security concern of the EduWave? There is something called memory overflow. This is a local attack that infects the computer only. It is not to infect the full environment. Once available, the facts are available in a computer, so that computer is under attack. An attack of what? Something called memory overflow. So here we have to recognize what is the memory overflow. Overflow, clearly saying. So literally speaking, so you are trespassing the limits. Overflow. Memory overflow means memory trespassing the limits. We are talking about a program that uses a space more than it is reserved for him. The program is not accepting the space allocated for his work and choosing and selecting and covering extra space. Whenever a program reserves, trespasses the space reserved for him, a memory overflow happens. The full computer gets stuck fully. Nothing will run. Don't say that I'm going to change the program. You cannot. The program will not reply. It is very difficult to find a space to make the computer act. For such scenarios, once the computer is, or let's say, has fell into an overflow, memory overflow issue, you have to switch the computer off using the hard turn off. Keep the button, the turn on button pressed for 4 seconds if you turn off the CPU. The stack. We were talking about the overflow. The overflow is a scenario via which a buffer to be overflow. Let's mean a buffer. And the RAM, wherever a program is running, not the full RAM is reserved for the program. There is a space allocated, and exactly specific space is allocated for that program. That space is subdivided into 6 portions. Amongst of them, the stack. And another space is the buffer. The buffer is where the program data resides. So the stack here is the space that comes before the, in order, it comes before the memory issue, the memory space, which is the buffer. And it holds variables and variants and indexes to elements that would be actually utilized within the buffer. So the stack is a sort of an array that holds list of variables, variants, pointers, indexes, things like that. As we define the stored procedure, we can define the extended stored procedure. The extended stored procedure is a sort of a procedure that has a multi-valued, multi-parameter, multi-type elements inside of it, and it uses multi-valued parameters in the sense of it can use not only, for example, it can use even user-defined types, things like that. So if you can talk about a multi-layer security, you'll be using more than one layer. So these are sort of an extended process, something like that. SQL stored procedure. So the same scenario, you are talking about a stored procedure that has an extended network, and it would be actually utilizing extra features, extra functionalities from, yes, extra features. But remember that the CLI is usually stored inside the server side. It's in background. It is in background. So the first thing to define actually as a T-SQL enhancement is the table valued parameters. The table valued parameters, TVP, table valued parameters. They are actually a group of resources this T-SQL enhances and can be utilized later on. What does it mean can be utilized later on? So they are actually enhancing the sort of automation, and they can be actually utilized through different aspects. Here we may say that the table valid parameter is a sort of a temporary space via which the program is using whatever needed in a short way and in a very fast way. This is the most important. And this TVP, this table valid parameter, is something to be defined within the discussion, and it can, since it is to be defined, so it has its own architecture, the shape, how it looks like, and this exactly point it faces and it imposes overloading issue, an overloading issue. It loads an overloading issue. Benefits or advantages of this TVP is that it can be utilized again and again and again and again during the life cycle of the, let's say, the project or whatever. Syntax. Through this example here, what I'm highlighting right now, actually it is compatible, this syntax here. It is completely compatible with the SQL Server. Compatibility with this, it works very fine. But when we talk about the example down here, Oracle, we will have actually the same definition at the end of the day. Yet this is running only in in Oracle, sorry, and this is running in SQL Server only, no more, no less. We are defining a type, create a type, giving it a username, which is ID here in this example. This is a user-defined name, remember, from whatever the data type you want. Here we said int, and it is not null. The second one is a location, immediately from the varchar, and the size is given here 100. So specified by the request, the question or something like that. So it is not technical perspective. It's not technically to say you have to use this create type ID from int. It's not must. No, this is an example only. The ID and the location, both of them, they are defined. No, now it is specified for this ID specifically, and watch 100. It is specific and specified for this location only also. It is defined. Have a look to both, please, the Oracle and this SQL Server, let's say queries, yes. And please, our transactions, please state to me what are the differences, what are the things that we have to add in this level only, the TVP, table valid parameters. Have a look, please. Otherwise, let me take the recorder. Let me take the attendance, please.